What would you do if a snowstorm locked you deep in the mountains and a wild animal stepped out of the shadows, alone, injured, and staring straight into your soul? This isn't just a story about survival. It's about an unexpected connection between a lonely woman and a creature no one dared to trust. A bond that defied nature, fear, and even the law. But their fragile peace wouldn't last, because soon the storm wasn't the only thing knocking at her door. Stay with us, because what happens next will break your heart, and maybe, just maybe, heal it too. The air in Central Oregon was sharp with the scent of pine and frost as Claire Hartley guided her forest green Jeep along a narrow mountain road just outside the town of Sisters. The paved asphalt had long since given way to packed gravel, and every turn curved deeper into the dense folds of the Deschutes National Forest. It was early December, and while most people were stringing lights around their porches and sipping peppermint lattes in town, Claire was chasing something else entirely: stillness, solitude. And maybe, if she was honest, something she couldn't name yet. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days, unless you counted the gas station attendant in Bend, who barely looked up when she paid for a thermos of coffee. Claire didn't mind. She wasn't used to talking much anymore. At 39, she had the kind of face that looked younger when she smiled, which she didn't do often. Her long auburn hair was tucked beneath a wool beanie, and her pale skin was slightly wind-chapped from the last 2 hours of open-window driving. She wore forest-toned layers, an olive parka, fleece sweater, and denim jeans tucked into brown hiking boots that had seen better days. Claire had once been known in wildlife illustration circles. Her sketches of birds, foxes, and mountain goats had appeared in both science journals and high-end nature prints. But lately, the colors in her mind had gone dim. After the miscarriage, and then the slow, bitter unraveling of her marriage, Claire had shut herself off. The sketchbook that once never left her side now gathered dust on the shelf. The only thing she found comfort in was the wild, untouched places where the world made sense, where pain didn't echo in every room. The cabin came into view after a long stretch of switchbacks. It sat nestled between 2 large fir trees, like it had grown there, half swallowed by the forest. Its roof was pitched steeply to shed the snow, and its chimney already sent up a thin curl of smoke. This was it, her retreat. Claire parked the Jeep on the flattened patch of gravel and stepped out into the crunch of icy earth. The cold met her like an old friend, sharp, honest, and clean. She took a deep breath and let the quiet seep into her bones. Inside, the cabin was simple. Rough-hewn wood, a stone fireplace, a hand-cranked radio on the table, and a narrow staircase leading up to a loft bed. It smelled faintly of cedar and old books. She walked the perimeter, checking the water tanks, the pantry shelves stocked by the owner, and the emergency generator out back. Everything was just as the rental agreement described. She lit a fire, made a cup of instant coffee, and curled up in the window seat, watching the trees sway as clouds rolled in low and heavy across the sky. Her sketchbook lay untouched on the small desk beside her duffel bag. She reached for it once, but stopped. Not yet. Instead, she opened the drawer of the nightstand and found a stack of old trail maps. She traced her finger along one thin red line that curved behind the property. She made a mental note to explore it, if the snow held off. That night, as she stirred a can of vegetable soup on the stove, the wind began to howl. Trees groaned, and something far off cried out, a wild, hollow sound she couldn't quite place. Not fearsome, not threatening, just distant. Claire stood by the window for a long moment, staring out at the white blankness. She didn't know what was waiting out there, but she knew she was meant to be here. That night, the storm arrived like a warning whispered too late. Claire was reading by the fireplace, a wool blanket draped across her legs, and the fire crackling low. Outside, the wind had risen from a gentle rustle to a moaning force that pressed against the window panes with long, rattling breaths. Snow lashed sideways, sharp and angry, piling fast against the porch and half burying the steps in less than an hour. The forecast had called for light flurries and a cold front. What this was felt different. She stood and checked the thermometer nailed to the outer window frame. 21 degrees and falling. The trees, once tall and still, now leaned and swayed like dancers in a frenzied wind. The sky had turned the color of lead, thick with snow clouds that showed no sign of breaking. Claire moved through the cabin with quiet urgency, checking the water barrels, securing the small firewood pile on the porch with bungee cords, and lighting 2 extra oil lanterns in case the power failed. Her cell phone had one flickering bar of service. She tried sending a message to her sister in Salem. Storms worse than expected. "I'm okay. We'll hunker down." It failed to send. The silence that followed was deeper than usual, the kind that pressed against your ears like a hand cupped too tightly. She lit the stove again, made more tea, and pulled her parka close, just in case the power went out. The cabin creaked around her, wood expanding, groaning softly as snow piled on the roof. The storm had turned the outside world into a blur. Nothing beyond 10 feet could be seen, as if the forest had been erased, leaving only wind and white. Claire sat near the fire again, pulling her sketchbook onto her lap. This time, she opened it. The page stared back at her, blank. She tapped her pencil twice, hovered it, then slowly began to draw the curve of a pine branch, bending under snow. Her hand shook at first, but the lines soon flowed. Then, something shifted. A sound, not wind, not trees. A faint scratching, somewhere near the back wall. She froze, pencil mid-stroke. There it was again, software hesitant, alive. Something or someone was out there. Claire stood completely still, heart hammering beneath her sweater. The sound was subtle, like claws, not nails. Software fragile, not a bear, not a person. Something smaller, more hesitant. She set her sketchbook aside, crossed the cabin slowly, and lifted the heavy latch on the back door. The cold slammed into her like a wall. As she opened it, just a crack, lantern in hand. The porch creaked beneath her boots as she stepped out. The storm had calmed slightly, wind slower now, snow falling in thick, steady flakes. She scanned the whitewashed world. At first, nothing. Then, movement. A small, shadowy shape near the edge of the woodshed, curled in the snow like a dropped mitten. Claire narrowed her eyes. The figure was trembling, covered in snow, barely distinguishable from the ground, except for its eyes. 2 pale, amber glints stared straight at her. A kitten, number bigger, stockier. Its ears gave it away, tall, triangular, tipped with little black tufts. The tail was short, barely more than a stub, flicking as if annoyed by the wind. A bobcat cub. She sucked in a slow breath. Claire had seen bobcats before, from a distance, on hikes, in field studies. But never this close and never like this. This one was young, probably 3 months old at most, and injured. Its left foreleg was curled under its body, not bearing weight. Its coat was matted with snow and twigs, light brown streaked with black spots, white fur beneath the chin. It was wild and beautiful, and alone. She took a slow step forward. The cub tensed, ears folding slightly, not aggressive but scared. Claire crouched, keeping her posture low. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered, as if scolding the storm for sending him. She returned inside, grabbed a bowl of warm water and a few pieces of leftover salmon she had cooked 2 nights before. Back outside, she set the bowl on the edge of the porch, then backed away. The cub didn't move at first, but after a minute its nose twitched. It sniffed. Then, inch by inch, it limped forward, drawn by the scent. He drank first, fast, gulping. Then, took cautious bites of fish. All the while, those amber eyes never left Claire. When the food was gone, the cub turned to leave, but stumbled. He didn't get far before collapsing again near the firewood pile, too weak or cold to keep going. Claire hesitated only a moment before moving back into the cabin. She opened the mudroom, an enclosed porch area just past the kitchen, and returned outside with a thick wool blanket and a clean towel. "You can stay here," she murmured, placing the blanket in a corner of the mudroom. "Just for tonight." The cub didn't resist as she slowly lifted him, not with her hands, but with the towel bundled beneath his belly. He was light, far too light. Inside the mudroom, the cub huddled into the blanket, eyes half-lidded, chest rising and falling in rapid, uneven breaths. Claire shut the door gently and sat on the other side, listening to the storm fade. She didn't know what to do tomorrow, but for tonight, she wasn't alone. By morning, the storm had wrapped the entire forest in silence. Claire awoke before the sun, chilled despite the fire still glowing faintly in the hearth. Her first thought wasn't coffee or breakfast, or even the snowfall. It was the cub. She slipped on her boots and moved to the mudroom slowly, quietly, as though afraid the night before had only been a dream. But there he was, curled in a tight ball of spotted fur, half covered by the blanket she'd left. His breathing was soft, shallow, but steady. One paw, his injured one, was slightly stretched out, the joint swollen. She could see now that it wasn't broken, but sprained, likely from a fall, or a chase gone wrong. A young predator too small to survive alone. His ears twitched when she stepped in, but he didn't lift his head. Claire sat cross-legged on the opposite side of the room. No sudden movements, no eye contact, just quiet presence. She remembered reading once that many wild animals, especially bobcats, interpret direct stares as a threat. She kept her gaze soft, unfocused. A few moments passed before she slid a small bowl of warm broth toward him. Not too close. He didn't move. Not yet. She watched him for a long time, her body still, heart strangely alive. She felt something she hadn't in over a year: purpose. Later that morning, she set out her sketchbook and began to draw again. Not trees, not landscapes. Him. She didn't give him a name, not yet. Naming things made them real, made them harder to let go of. By the third day, the cub had started eating more steadily. He dragged himself, slow and shaky, to the corner, where she placed a bit of chicken and more broth. His eyes were clearer now, his coat a little less matted. He still didn't let her touch him, but he no longer flinched when she entered. Each night, Claire sat just on the other side of the mudroom door, sketching by lantern light. Sometimes she spoke in a low voice, telling stories she hadn't told anyone in years, about the miscarriage, about how the hospital smelled of lemon cleaner and sorrow, about how she'd lost more than just a child that day. She'd lost the version of herself that once believed the world was gentle. The cub didn't answer, of course, but he stayed. And that was enough. One night, while she was slicing boiled sweet potato for her dinner, she heard a soft thump behind her. She turned, slowly. There he was, just inside the kitchen, his paws careful on the wooden floor, his tail twitching low. He had followed the warmth and the scent of food. Claire didn't move. She simply lowered herself onto the floor and sat. The cub crept forward, then lay down a few feet from her, nose resting on his foreleg. He watched her. Not with fear, with trust, tentative, but real. That was the night she named him. "Ash," she whispered, watching the way the light danced across the smoky brown of his fur. "Because you came from the storm, and you stayed." He blinked slowly, no sound, no response, but he didn't leave. Over the next few days, the two settled into a rhythm. Claire kept him mostly in the mudroom, or just inside the front door. She never closed him in. He came and went as he pleased, always slow, always quiet. She fashioned a sort of sling from an old towel to support his foreleg, just enough to keep weight off it. He tolerated it for an hour at a time. She read him the names of bobcat behaviors from her old field notes: ambush hunter, solitary territorial ranges, crepuscular. But Ash didn't feel like a textbook. He felt like something else, something between wild and wounded, something not unlike her. By the end of the week, the storm had passed and the roads were still buried. But the cabin felt different. Less like a hiding place, more like home, neighbor conflict. Claire didn't expect visitors, not this deep into the mountains, and certainly not during snow season. So when a knock echoed sharply against the cabin door just before noon, it made her jolt, spilling half her mug of coffee. Ash, now lying comfortably on a folded blanket near the fireplace, perked his ears and rose to a crouch, low and cautious. His tail flicked once. His eyes locked on the door. Claire peeked through the window. A man in a faded flannel jacket and Carhartt beanie stood on the porch, stamping snow from his boots. Dean McAllister. She exhaled. He was a local landowner who lived about a mile down the road, a retired game warden with a sharp tongue, and a sharper sense of who did or didn't belong in the woods. She opened the door cautiously, blocking Ash from view. "Dean," she said with a nod. "Didn't expect company." "Snow's easing up. Figured I'd check in on the seasonal renters," he said, brushing ice off his shoulders. "You holding up?" Claire nodded. "Fine. Cabin's tight. Plenty of firewood." He glanced past her into the room. "Saw some small tracks around the place. Thought maybe you had raccoons sniffing for scraps." Claire's throat tightened. "Nope, just me." But just then, a soft shuffle came from behind her. Ash had risen. His spotted body, low and cautious, stepped into view behind her legs. Silent, but unmistakable. Dean's face changed instantly. "Whoa, what the hell is that?" His voice snapped like a twig. Claire turned, hand raised gently. "It's a bobcat cub. He was injured. Found him half dead during the storm." Dean's jaw clenched. "Claire, you can't keep a wild animal. That's not just illegal, it's dangerous. They're predators." "He's a baby," she shot back. "He hasn't harmed anything." Dean stepped back. "You're not a rehabber. If someone reports this, Fish and Wildlife will be up here in a heartbeat. You don't know what you're risking." "I know what I'm doing," she said, her voice quieter but firmer. Dean stared at her for a beat longer. Then he shook his head. "You better pray that cat stays quiet." And then he left. The cub's injury worsens. That evening, the air inside the cabin felt heavier, thicker, like the walls had absorbed the tension from Dean's visit. Claire paced the small space, watching Ash closely as he curled up beside the hearth. But something was wrong. He hadn't touched his food. His breathing was shallow, and he kept licking at his front paw, the same one he'd been favoring for days. When Claire knelt beside him, she saw the joint had swelled again, even more than before. And worse, it was warm to the touch. Infection. A flare of panic tightened her stomach. She grabbed her first aid kit and laid it open on the floor, sifting through antiseptics, tweezers, gauze. But this wasn't like treating a domestic animal. One wrong move and Ash could lash out. Fear could override the fragile bond they'd built. Still, she had no choice. Kneeling beside him, she spoke softly. "Easy, buddy. Just a little help, okay?" She cleaned around the injury, careful not to touch the inflamed skin directly. Ash flinched once, then froze. Claire's hands trembled, but she didn't stop. She mixed a warm saline solution and applied it with a damp cloth, then wrapped the paw loosely in sterile gauze. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and exhaled. Ash looked at her for a long time, silent, unmoving. Then he leaned forward and placed his chin gently on her knee. Claire's breath caught in her throat. He trusted her. That moment, soft and almost weightless, struck her harder than words ever could. Still, fear lingered. If the infection spread, she couldn't treat it alone. But taking him to a vet meant exposure, legal trouble, possibly losing him. She sat by the fire that night with Ash curled beside her and the wildlife enforcement pamphlet Dean had left in her mailbox months ago, unopened until now. She didn't want to lose him, but the world beyond the cabin was waiting. And it didn't play fair with wild things. A dangerous situation arises. The wind returned 3 nights later, not in a slow build like before, but sudden, violent, relentless. Claire was jolted awake by a loud crack overhead. A flash of cold panic shot through her chest. She sat upright in bed, just as another blast of wind slammed into the cabin walls, shaking the rafters with a deep groan. Ash was already up, pacing near the fireplace, ears flattened, tail twitching like a metronome of unease. Claire grabbed her flashlight and ran barefoot down the ladder from the loft. The temperature had dropped fast, too fast. The air inside the cabin felt brittle. The fire burned low, and outside the windows, snow came sideways in thick gusts. Something was wrong. Then came the sound again, sharper this time, not wind, wood, cracking, splitting. She looked up just as a large branch, or part of the roof itself, collapsed onto the rear porch, slamming against the mudroom wall with a deafening bang. A shudder ran through the floorboards. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling. The lights flickered, then died. The cabin was plunged into darkness. "Ash!" she called, voice cracking as she fumbled for matches. The flashlight beam flickered, showing Ash crouched low, alert, but calm. Claire lit a lantern with trembling hands. The yellow glow filled the space with flickering shadows. She moved to the back room. The mudroom was half buried in snow. The outer door had been torn open, and snow was pouring in through a crack in the roof. Ash's corner, his blanket, his towel sling, everything was soaked or covered in debris. She turned to find Ash behind her, staring at the damage. "We have to move," she said quietly. She bundled him gently in her arms, wrapping his body in a dry fleece and carrying him into the main room. He was heavier now, stronger than he'd been that first night, but still small enough to fit in her arms like a child. She set him by the fire, added more wood, and turned to assess the damage. But her breath caught as she saw water creeping along the floor from the back room. One of the water pipes had burst. There was no time to waste. If the temperature kept falling and the cabin structure was compromised, it wouldn't be safe. And if Ash's infection worsened overnight, she couldn't risk waiting anymore. She made the decision then, quietly, without drama. They had to leave. The Bobcat saves the woman. Claire packed what she could in under 10 minutes. Just the essentials. A thermal blanket, her first aid kit, a protein bar, a flashlight, and a small water bottle. She bundled Ash into her old canvas tote, padded with towels, and slung it carefully over her shoulder. He didn't fight her. He simply looked up with tired, trusting eyes. The sky outside was a swirling wall of white. Wind screamed between the trees like a warning. Claire knew the trail to Dean McAllister's property ran east, less than a mile away. Under normal conditions, she could hike it in 20 minutes. But with fresh snow up to her knees and the temperature falling below 10 degrees, that same hike could take hours or longer. Still, she stepped out into the storm. One step, then another. The cold hit her like a blow to the chest. Each breath burned. Snow blinded her vision. She kept one arm tight around the tote, shielding Ash, the other held the flashlight low, scanning for any trace of the path. Minutes passed, or hours. Time didn't feel linear in the storm. It bent and blurred. Claire's legs ached. Her boots filled with snow. Her fingers went numb beneath her gloves. At one point she slipped, falling to one knee. Her face hit the snow. Her body screamed for rest. But Ash let out a soft cry from the tote. That tiny sound kept her moving. They pressed forward, weaving between trees, crossing a frozen ditch, climbing a shallow ridge. But by the time they reached the clearing near the barbed fence that bordered Dean's land, Claire could barely stand. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her vision blurred. She staggered forward, 3 steps, then fell hard into the snow. Her hands wouldn't respond. She couldn't move. Ash climbed out of the tote, limping through the snow, and pressed his body against her chest. He pawed at her collar, then licked her face, firm, urgent strokes, whining, calling, refusing to let her fall asleep. Her eyelids fluttered. Then a voice, muffled at first. "Claire!" Footsteps crunching fast through the snow. Dean. He dropped to her side, checked her pulse, and scooped her into his arms. "What the hell were you thinking?" he growled, voice trembling. But Claire couldn't answer. The last thing she saw was Ash, tucked against her shoulder, still watching her, with eyes that refused to give up. Letting go. Claire woke to warmth. Not the firelit kind from her cabin, but something cleaner, sterile. Soft beeping filled the room. A slow IV drip tapped rhythmically beside her bed. She blinked against the pale overhead light, disoriented, her throat dry and tight. Dean sat in the corner, arms crossed, a mug of hospital coffee steaming on the windowsill. He noticed her stirring and stood. "You're lucky," he said. "Borderline hypothermia. Few more minutes and, well, let's just say that cat wasn't the only wild one out there saving lives." Claire's lips moved, dry and cracked. "Ash, he's fine," Dean replied. "Tough little guy. Stayed right next to you the whole time. The vet at the wildlife center cleaned up his paw. Minor infection. He'll recover." Her heart lifted, then immediately sank. "Wildlife center." Dean nodded slowly. "I had to call Fish and Wildlife. Claire, he's a wild animal. You know that. You did what you could, but keeping him, it wasn't going to end well." She turned away, her eyes filling with tears. "He trusted me." Dean stepped closer, more gently now. "And you didn't betray that. You saved him. You saved each other." Claire spent 2 nights in the hospital. On the morning of the 3rd, a woman from the Oregon Wildlife Rescue Association visited her room. She was kind but firm, explaining Ash's new placement at a rehabilitation facility near Eugene. He would be monitored, treated, and, if all went well, reintroduced into the wild the following spring. "He's responding well," the woman added. "He's cautious but not aggressive, bonded to you, clearly. That can make rewilding difficult, but not impossible." Claire asked if she could see him. They made an exception. That afternoon, she walked slowly across the facility yard, heart pounding as she approached the small outdoor enclosure. Ash sat inside, perched atop a log, his legs still wrapped but healing. He looked up. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Claire crouched near the fence, voice trembling. "I guess this is goodbye, wild one." Ash didn't move, but after a long, silent pause, he stepped forward and pressed his forehead gently against the wire. Claire pressed hers back. Neither blinked. Neither needed to. "I'll always carry you with me," she whispered. And in that moment, surrounded by fences, snow, and second chances, Claire finally let go. Not just of Ash, but of the pain she'd held inside for too long. The bobcat becomes an irreplaceable friend. 1 year later, the mountains looked different. It was late November again, and snow had just begun to kiss the trees along the slopes above Sisters, Oregon. The cabin stood solid and still, newly repaired, its roof fortified, the porch rebuilt, and fresh firewood stacked neatly beside the door. Claire stepped out of her Jeep, inhaling the crisp air. She had returned, not to hide this time, but to remember. In her arms was a finished manuscript. Ash in the Winter, a true story of wild hearts, filled with delicate sketches of a bobcat cub in every stage of trust, fear, healing, and strength. The dedication page read, "For the one who walked out of the storm and into my soul." She carried the book inside and placed it on the shelf above the fireplace, beside a framed photo of the old forest trail. The cabin was no longer just a retreat. It was part of her story now, a place where she had come undone and somehow been pieced back together. That afternoon, she bundled in her coat and hiked up the ridge, boots crunching lightly through the snow. The same trail she had taken toward Dean's house during that fateful blizzard now stretched peacefully beneath towering pines. With each step, memories flickered, falling, freezing, Ash's breath warm against her cheek. At the top of the ridge, she paused. The trees were quiet, the sky silver and open. A gentle wind stirred the branches, and the world felt breathless. Then, movement. Just beyond the edge of the clearing, something slipped between the trees. Silent, graceful, wild. A bobcat, full-grown now, powerful and beautiful. Its coat glowed with rich winter fur, spotted, thick, dusted with snow. Its amber eyes met hers, calm and unflinching. Claire didn't move, neither did he. For a moment they simply looked at each other, two beings forever changed by a single winter. Then Ash, because she knew it was him, lowered his head once, slow and deliberate, a gesture of recognition. Then he turned and vanished, back into the trees, into the freedom he was always meant to reclaim. Claire stood there a long time, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, heart full, but not broken. Because this time she knew. Love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go and trusting that the wild things will find their way back, if only for a moment. And sometimes that moment is forever. Sometimes the wildest hearts are the ones that teach us the deepest lessons. In Claire's story, we learned that healing doesn't always come from people. It can come from unexpected places, from silence, from nature, and from the quiet trust of a creature who has every reason to fear, but chooses not to. Ash reminded us that love doesn't have to last forever to change us forever, and that sometimes letting go is the bravest act of all. Maybe you've been through your own storm. Maybe you're still in it. But the world has a strange way of sending us what we need, whether it walks on two legs or four paws. If this story stirred something in you, stay with us here on Paw Prints and Stories. This is where hearts meet fur, where real emotion meets wild instincts, and where every tale leaves a footprint. Here's your challenge. Think about someone or something you've held on to too tightly. What would it look like to set it free? And trust that if it's meant to return, it will. And finally, remember, even the wild can love you back.